The morning of July 20th, 2019, started like any other in Oxford, Mississippi. Law enforcement officers were on their routine patrols, keeping an eye on the quiet town. But at exactly 10:23 a.m., a deputy noticed something out of place near an old, weathered wooden picnic table. As he moved closer, his stomach sank. Lying motionless on the ground was the body of a young woman. Any hope that she might still be alive vanished within seconds. She had been shot multiple times. There were no signs of life. The deputy immediately called for backup, and within the hour, the crime scene was flooded with investigators, forensic specialists, and law enforcement officials. They worked quickly to gather evidence, knowing that every second counted in a case like this. The victim was identified almost immediately. 21-year-old Alexandria Costial, a student at the University of Mississippi. Later, the medical examiner confirmed the chilling details. Allie had been shot 9 times at close range. Dear viewers, please don't forget to like, leave a comment under the video, and subscribe to the channel so as not to miss new videos. This is very important to us. Let's start from the very beginning and take a closer look at this true crime involving Alexandria Madison Costial, whom her loved ones affectionately called Ally. She was born on September 11, 1997, to Cindy and Keith Costial. From the moment she entered the world, she radiated an infectious warmth and a boundless enthusiasm for life. Growing up in St. Louis, Missouri, alongside her younger brother Andrew, Allie quickly became the heart of her family and social circles. She was the kind of person whose presence alone could brighten even the darkest days. Allie had an undeniable magnetism that drew people toward her. Even as a child, Allie possessed a unique ability to connect with others. She treated strangers with the same kindness and warmth as she did her closest friends and family members. Her generosity of spirit was not just an act of politeness, it was an integral part of who she was. She had a way of making people feel seen, valued, and loved, which was why so many gravitated toward her. Her optimism was unwavering, and her ability to find beauty in even the smallest moments made her truly special. Beyond her glowing personality, Allie was a dedicated and accomplished young woman. Throughout high school, from 2012 to 2016, she excelled both academically and athletically. She was a standout member of the track and field team, the golf team, and the field team. Her leadership skills shone through in her involvement with the Youth Government Support Group and the National Honor Society. But Allie's talents extended beyond the classroom and sports field. She had an insatiable thirst for new experiences and took on numerous extracurricular activities with enthusiasm. She practiced yoga regularly, finding solace in the serenity it brought her, and participated in half marathons whenever she had a break from her studies. Her passion for helping others was equally evident. Allie spent several summers traveling abroad as a volunteer, dedicating her time to teaching young children in Peru and Africa how to speak English. She found immense joy in uplifting those around her, firmly believing in the principle, "Don't be afraid to be who you are." This mantra guided her actions and inspired those who knew her. She embraced people wholeheartedly, never judging them for their quirks or flaws. Her unwavering loyalty made her a treasured friend, and her ability to be unapologetically herself was a quality admired by many. Allie's ambition didn't stop at high school. After graduating, she pursued her lifelong dream of attending the University of Mississippi, better known as Ole Miss, in Oxford. She had envisioned herself there since childhood, and in the fall of 2016, that dream became a reality. There were many reasons why Ole Miss had always been her ideal school. She was drawn to its preppy, classic fashion style, which reflected the refined elegance she adored. The young woman had an affinity for all things pink and was rarely seen without her signature pearl accessories. She had a deep appreciation for beauty, whether in fashion, nature, or life itself. Sunsets were among her greatest passions. She loved the way the sky was painted in hues of pink and orange as the sun dipped below the horizon. In fact, she was so enamored with sunsets that she created a social media page solely dedicated to capturing and sharing them with the world. Of course, there were more profound reasons for her love of Ole Miss. She admired the university's deep-rooted traditions, the distinguished professors who inspired her, and the lively atmosphere that made college life exhilarating. She was especially excited about the presence of a major football team, as she had always enjoyed the camaraderie that sports fostered. Enrolling in Ole Miss wasn't just about obtaining a degree in business and marketing. It was about embracing new opportunities, making lifelong memories, and, most importantly, finding happiness. Allie wasted no time immersing herself in campus life. She became a proud member of the Alpha Kappa Psi Women's Club, joined the business community, and even founded a golf club. Her passion for fitness remained strong, and in her free time, she taught yoga and Pilates classes, helping fellow students find balance in their busy lives. Despite her packed schedule, Allie never allowed her studies to suffer. She was meticulous in her time management, ensuring that every aspect of her life was given the attention it deserved. Yet despite all her achievements, there was one thing Allie felt was missing: love. Like many young college students, she dreamed of meeting someone special, someone who would become her partner for life. She had always been enchanted by the charm of Southern boys and the warmth of Southern culture, and she hoped that her time at Ole Miss would lead her to a meaningful relationship. She envisioned a future filled with love, marriage, a happy family, and children of her own. In high school, Allie had experienced infatuations, but none had developed into anything serious. She attended prom without a boyfriend, instead choosing to go with a close girlfriend. Love had eluded her then, but she remained hopeful that college would be different. And finally, her wish came true. Allie met Brandon Theld, a fellow freshman from Fort Worth, Texas. From the moment they met, there was an undeniable spark between them. Allie fell for him instantly, and as their freshman year progressed, they became inseparable. She invited him to almost every party, eager to share every moment of her new life with him. Although many people assumed that Allie and Brandon were in a committed relationship, the truth was far more complicated. Their connection, if it could even be called that, was riddled with inconsistencies and contradictions. They never officially declared themselves as boyfriend and girlfriend, never made long-term plans together, and never envisioned a shared future. At times, Brandon would abruptly cut off all communication, blocking Allie's number for weeks or even months. She was drawn to Brandon from the very beginning. She imagined their relationship growing into something profound, a love story that would culminate in marriage and a future together. But Brandon was not the kind of person who valued deep emotional attachments. He was a self-serving manipulator, someone who knew exactly how to string Allie along without ever offering her true commitment. To him, she was just one of many. He had mastered the art of making each woman in his life believe they were special while never investing in any of them beyond temporary gratification. He thrived on the illusion of romance, keeping his options open and his emotions guarded. If Allie ever pressed him for clarity, he deflected, claiming that he was not good enough for her, that she deserved someone better, using false humility as a weapon to keep her tethered to his whims. Their relationship was an emotional whirlwind, an endless cycle of highs and lows. One moment, Allie was euphoric, feeling cherished and adored, and the next, she was consumed by despair, questioning her worth and fighting back tears. Unlike true partners, Brandon never made an effort to integrate himself into her life. He never visited her home, never made an effort to know her friends, and remained a shadowy figure in her world. Most of Allie's close friends barely knew of his existence beyond what she told them, and even then, she revealed very little. She internalized the turmoil, confiding in no one, perhaps even convincing herself that things were not as bad as they seemed. She was isolated, trapped in a one-sided love affair fueled by her own hope and his calculated indifference. In the past, Allie had always been open with her mother, Cindy, sharing the details of her life and her emotions with unfiltered honesty. Cindy knew her daughter had feelings for a boy from her course, but Allie never fully disclosed the true nature of her relationship with Brandon. Perhaps she feared judgment, or maybe she herself hadn't come to terms with how unhealthy it had become. She wasn't naive. She was simply a 19-year-old woman, far from home, intoxicated by the thrill of attention from someone she cared about. But no matter how much she wished for it, the reality was that she was trapped in a toxic cycle of emotional manipulation. Fast forward to the summer of 2019, a significant time in Allie's life as she approached her final year of college. She had recently turned 21 and had chosen to remain on campus for the summer. She spent those months attending summer courses, engaging in extracurricular activities, and enjoying the company of her friends. Despite the occasional emotional turmoil caused by Brandon, Allie tried to focus on her goals and personal growth. In early July, Allie's parents visited her, a trip that brought her immense joy. They spent quality time together setting up her new off-campus apartment, shopping for essentials, cooking meals, and simply enjoying one another's presence. Allie had missed them dearly and wished they could stay longer. She even begged them to extend their visit by just one more day, but obligations back in St. Louis forced them to leave. Cindy later recalled feeling an unusual heaviness in her heart as they said goodbye, an inexplicable sorrow she couldn't quite place at the time. Still, they kept in touch regularly. Allie frequently called home, updating her parents on her life, her studies, and her daily activities. On July 19, 2019, Allie made one of those routine calls. It was around 7 p.m., and she had just woken up from a long nap. The night before, she had stayed up late studying for an important test, exhausting herself in the process. She chatted with her mother, filling her in on the day's plans. Later that evening, she intended to go out with friends to a bar. It was an ordinary conversation, nothing out of the ordinary, no signs, no warnings, nothing to suggest that in just a few hours, tragedy would strike. Later that night, at exactly 11:52 p.m., surveillance cameras positioned outside a business on Oxford Square captured Allie leaving the bar alone. The footage showed her staring at her phone screen, walking in the opposite direction of the establishment. Later that night, a taxi arrived to pick up Allie. The driver confirmed that she remained polite throughout the short ride back to her apartment. By the time the vehicle pulled up to her residence, it was just past midnight. The driver watched as Allie stepped out, walked toward her building, and disappeared inside. The morning of July 20th, 2019, began as any other, with law enforcement patrolling various areas around Oxford. That day, a Lafayette County deputy sheriff was conducting a routine patrol in Harmon Town near Lake Sardis, a remote area approximately 30 miles north of the Ole Miss campus. The officer didn't expect to find anything unusual, but as he neared an abandoned fishing spot along the shore, his routine drive turned into the start of a harrowing investigation. At precisely 10:23 a.m., the deputy spotted something unusual near a weathered wooden picnic table. As he approached, his worst fears were confirmed. The lifeless body of a young woman lay sprawled across the ground. It was immediately apparent that she had been shot multiple times. No signs of life remained. The officer quickly called for backup, and within the hour, the crime scene was swarming with investigators. The victim was identified almost immediately. It was 21-year-old Ole Miss student Alexandria Costial. The medical examiner later determined that Allie had been shot a total of 9 times at close range. The pattern of shell casings surrounding the scene suggested that the shooter had moved in a circular motion, firing at Allie from multiple angles as she sat on the picnic bench, unable to escape. Investigators located 11 spent shell casings littering the dirt around her, as well as her purse, which had been tossed into a ditch several feet away. Inside the bag, detectives discovered her student ID and driver's license, both of which confirmed her identity. As officers pieced together the crime scene, they noted one peculiar absence. Allie's mobile phone was missing. This small but crucial detail hinted that the killer had taken the device, either to prevent her from calling for help or to erase evidence. Attempts to track the phone's GPS yielded only a vague location ping somewhere in Oxford, providing little useful information. However, Allie's smartwatch, which she often wore, proved to be an unexpected lifeline in the investigation. Allie's smartwatch was synced to her missing phone, allowing investigators to retrieve duplicated text messages from the night of her murder. The records revealed a conversation between Allie and one specific individual, her classmate, 22-year-old Brandon Theld. It wasn't just idle chit-chat. The texts showed that Allie and Brandon had arranged to meet shortly after she left the bar that night, choosing to part ways with her friends for reasons unknown. Allie's friends were quick to confirm Brandon's name when questioned. When asked if anyone might have had a reason to harm Allie, his name surfaced immediately. One of Brandon's own roommates described him as a deeply misogynistic, arrogant individual who frequently made crude, derogatory comments about women. He had a history of manipulating those around him, making false promises, and discarding people once he no longer had use for them. To those who knew him well, it came as little surprise that he might be involved in something sinister. With suspicion mounting, investigators reached out to Brandon, requesting that he come in for questioning. He agreed but failed to appear at the scheduled time. When officers called him again, he provided a flimsy excuse, claiming he had been drinking the night before and wasn't in a state to speak with law enforcement. A second meeting was arranged for the following morning. Again, Brandon agreed, but once more, he failed to show. This time, however, his absence was no accident. Brandon Theld was officially on the run. With Brandon now a fugitive, authorities acted swiftly. A warrant was issued for his arrest, and his name was entered into the national database. Investigators tracked his movements through his mobile phone records and credit card transactions, which painted a clear picture of his escape route. The data indicated that he was heading toward Memphis, Tennessee. A statewide bulletin was sent out, alerting authorities to be on the lookout for his vehicle, a dark-colored pickup truck. Within hours, the Memphis Police Department's fugitive task force spotted a vehicle matching the description at a gas station just outside the city. Officers surrounded the suspect, took him into custody without incident, and discovered damning evidence inside the truck. In the passenger seat of Brandon's vehicle sat a .40 caliber pistol. Forensic analysis later confirmed that this was the same weapon used to kill Allie. Even more incriminating was the presence of bloodstains on Brandon's shirt. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Brandon vehemently denied any involvement in Allie's death. He maintained his innocence, insisting that he had no reason to harm her. But law enforcement wasn't convinced. Within hours of his capture, Brandon Theld was charged with first-degree murder. Following his arrest, Brandon was extradited back to Mississippi, where he was held without bail. He refused to speak with detectives, invoking his right to remain silent until legal counsel was present. Investigators, determined to build a rock-solid case, began piecing together his actions leading up to the murder. They discovered that on the weekend of Allie's death, Brandon had spent time with his usual group of friends. Witnesses confirmed that he had gone bowling with them. However, Sunday took a different turn. That evening, Brandon showed up at a friend's house, carrying a pistol. There was nothing unusual about this either. Brandon arrived at his friend's house carrying a six-pack of beer, a familiar habit for their weekend gatherings. They spent the evening drinking, sharing stories, and engaging in casual target practice, setting up empty cans along the fence line and taking turns shooting at them. Brandon seemed relaxed, unbothered, his demeanor giving no indication of the events that had taken place just hours earlier. But when his friend woke up the next morning, Brandon was already gone. His truck missing from the driveway, his presence vanished without a trace. Brandon Theld was born into a well-respected Christian family in Texas, where he was raised with love and discipline. His parents, both successful doctors, ensured he had a comfortable upbringing. His father owned a private clinic, and his mother worked at a hospital, setting high expectations for their son. Brandon grew up enjoying the great outdoors, hunting and fishing, pastimes that many young men from his town partook in. In high school, he played football, excelling in sports but never showing any signs of aggression or violence. There were no known incidents of fights, outbursts, or behavioral problems. To those who knew him then, Brandon was just another all-American boy with a bright future ahead of him. But something changed when he entered the University of Mississippi. That was where he met Allie Costial at a bar one night. Their attraction was evident, but even from the beginning, it was clear that Allie liked Brandon much more than he liked her. As time went on, Allie's attachment deepened, and she sent him more and more messages. Eventually, The sheer volume of texts overwhelmed Brandon to the point that he blocked her number. But as patterns often repeat, something changed once again, and before long, the two resumed communication. Meanwhile, the investigation into Allie's murder continued, and as details unfolded, the community was shaken to its core. On July 27, 2019, more than 100 people gathered in Oxford for a candlelight vigil in honor of Alexandria Costial. Friends, classmates, and professors mourned the loss of a young woman described as a bright light in their lives, someone who had left an unforgettable mark on everyone she met. One question haunted them all. Who could possibly have wanted to harm Allie? The answer, though devastating, was undeniable. Brandon Theld. On July 23rd, Brandon made his first court appearance, officially charged with the murder of Allie Costial. But as investigators delved deeper into their relationship, they uncovered a shocking revelation that shifted the narrative of the case. The motive, it seemed, was far more heartbreaking than anyone had imagined. In April 2019, just 3 months before her murder, Allie had been preparing for her spring semester final exams. However, unbeknownst to her friends and family, she was also focused on another kind of test, a pregnancy test. On April 12th, Allie sent Brandon a message explaining that feared she might be pregnant. His response was immediate. He instructed her not to tell anyone, not their friends, not her family. He needed time to process what she was saying. 2 days later, Allie sent Brandon a photo of the test. It was unclear, neither fully positive nor definitively negative. A faint second line appeared, leaving room for uncertainty. With the picture, Allie also sent a simple yet significant request. Could they meet in person to talk? Brandon did not respond. Days passed, and Allie sent more messages, growing anxious with each unanswered text. Finally, when Brandon did reply, his response was neither supportive nor kind. His message was brutally clear. He had no interest in discussing it further. If she was pregnant, he wanted her to fix the situation immediately. He urged her to take a pill and put an end to it. He insisted that he did not want a child, claiming that fatherhood would ruin his future. He was unyielding, refusing to offer Allie even the slightest reassurance. If she chose to keep the baby, she would be on her own. He would not help, he would not acknowledge the child, and he would not allow this situation to dictate his life. His words were cold, devoid of emotion, as he repeated over and over that she was making a mistake by keeping the baby. From April through July, Allie continued reaching out, desperately hoping for a conversation, a resolution, some level of understanding. But Brandon avoided her at all costs. He ignored her texts for days at a time, only to reply with short, dismissive responses that made it clear he wanted nothing to do with her or the pregnancy. Several times, Allie asked to meet in person, but Brandon repeatedly canceled at the last minute. Still, she refused to give up. At one particularly dark moment, Allie made a disturbing admission. She had attempted to drink herself into oblivion, hoping that alcohol poisoning would bring an end to her suffering. She listed the staggering amounts she had consumed in a single night: an entire bottle of tequila, 2 bottles of champagne, 7 cans of beer, and a glass of wine. While it was clear to any rational observer that these claims were likely exaggerated, the underlying message was undeniable. This was a desperate cry for help. Many people who knew him regarded him as a spoiled daddy's boy, someone who flaunted his father's wealth as a shield against consequences. He often bragged that his father's money could get him out of any trouble, that no matter what he did, he would never have to face real consequences. But this time, he was wrong. The evidence against Brandon was overwhelming. Beyond the bullet casings that matched his pistol, the bloodstains on his shirt, and the text messages proving he had met Allie that fateful night, there was another damning piece of evidence, one that revealed his state of mind in the aftermath of the crime. When police searched Brandon's apartment, they uncovered a handwritten letter addressed to his parents. While it stopped short of being an outright confession, its contents spoke volumes. In the letter, Brandon expressed guilt and remorse, acknowledging that he was a bad person but insisting that it wasn't his parents' fault. He described being tormented by dark thoughts, which were exacerbated by alcohol, and admitted that he saw no way out. He wrote that he would either go to prison or die, seemingly resigned to his fate. The letter painted a picture of a man who knew he would be caught, a man who had already accepted that his actions would lead to ruin. Brandon's lawyer later claimed that this was nothing more than a suicide note, evidence that Brandon had intended to harm himself. The letter, along with the mountain of other evidence, pointed to one undeniable fact. Ali's murder was premeditated. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered more disturbing details that further solidified their case. 1 week before Ali's death, on Friday, July 12th, Brandon made an unexpected trip from Oxford to Fort Worth, returning to his parents' house under the guise of a casual visit. But the real reason for his trip soon became clear. While at home, he retrieved his pistol, a weapon he had left behind when he moved to college, and brought it back with him to Mississippi. He even took a photograph of the gun and posted it on social media with the caption, "Finally bringing my baby back to Oxford." As detectives continued to piece together the puzzle, they made another chilling discovery. Brandon's internet search history in the days leading up to the murder. Among his searches were phrases like how to get away with committing a crime, how to plan a murder, how to tie people up, and how to lure them into a trap. He also looked up tactical face masks and gun silencers. It was clear that Brandon had spent considerable time crafting his plan, ensuring that when the time came, he would be ready. Brandon's defense attorney attempted to argue that internet searches alone did not prove premeditated murder. He claimed that Brandon had simply been curious, that people searched for all sorts of things online without acting on them. He also insisted that Brandon bringing his gun back to Mississippi was not suspicious. After all, Oxford had shooting ranges where students regularly practiced, but the prosecution wasn't buying it. On July 17, 2019, Brandon finally broke his months-long silence and reached out to Ali. For the first time since April, he pretended he wanted to talk about the pregnancy. He dangled the possibility of reconciliation, leading Ali to believe that he was ready to discuss their future. She was ecstatic, unaware that she was walking into a trap. Then on the night of July 18, at precisely 1:53 a.m., Ali sent Brandon a message with a photo of her belly. Though it was barely visible, she was convinced that she was beginning to show. For Brandon, this was the tipping point. The sight of that message ignited a terror in him, one that could only be extinguished by silencing Ali permanently. That very day, Brandon reached out to Ali once again. He casually asked whether her friends would be around when he visited. The young woman, hopeful and naive, believed that Brandon's insistence on secrecy stemmed from the delicate nature of the conversation they were about to have. She interpreted his request as a sign that he was finally taking responsibility and wanted to address the situation in private. Feeling an enormous sense of relief, mixed with nervous anticipation, Ali readily agreed to meet him without witnesses. She reassured herself that he was finally willing to listen and work through the situation together. In reality, however, Brandon had no intention of offering support. His only goal was to ensure that she would be alone, away from prying eyes, and that no one would be able to track her whereabouts once she left with him. By the time July 19 arrived, Brandon was still meticulously setting his plan into motion. He confirmed their meeting time once more, solidifying the arrangement. The two agreed to meet after Ali returned from the bar, with Ali promising to leave early so nothing would interfere with their long overdue discussion. Surveillance footage later captured Brandon's truck, its distinctive license plate clearly visible, heading toward Ali's residence at exactly 1:14 a.m. The same camera later recorded the vehicle moving in the opposite direction, confirming that he had taken her somewhere. GPS data corroborated this, showing that Ali's and Brandon's mobile phones were in close proximity as they traveled through Oxford, their destination, Lake Sardis. Brandon had been drinking heavily throughout the day, drowning himself in alcohol long before picking Ali up. Once they reached the secluded location, he continued consuming alcohol, his intoxication making him more volatile and unpredictable. Seated at an old picnic table by the water, they began talking. Allie, eager and nervous, tried to get him to understand her feelings, to make him see that this was about more than just him. But as the conversation progressed, Brandon's temper flared. Enraged by the situation, frustrated by the reality he refused to accept, he stormed off to his truck. Allie had no idea what was about to happen. Moments later, Brandon returned, now holding a pistol in his hand. Without hesitation, he raised the weapon and opened fire. Allie never stood a chance. She was shot at least 9 times, the force of the bullets knocking her backward, her body collapsing onto the table. One bullet even lodged into the wood, marking the place where she had spent her final moments. Witnesses later recalled hearing multiple shots in the vicinity between 2 and 2:30 a.m. But by the time anyone realized something was wrong, it was too late. At exactly 10 a.m., according to GPS data, both mobile phones began moving back toward Oxford. Brandon, now having committed the crime, didn't waste time dwelling on what he had done. Less than an hour after returning to town, he searched the internet for information on how to monitor police radio channels. Soon after, he scoured the web for news related to Lake Sardis, Mississippi, likely wanting to see if Allie's body had been discovered. Over the next several hours, his phone continued pinging from the same cellular towers as Allie's, until hers abruptly lost signal. Investigators later concluded that Brandon had powered down her phone before disposing of it. Then, as if nothing had happened, he casually went to meet up with his friends, drank beer, and even flaunted his pistol. On August 22nd, Brandon appeared in court for a bail hearing. However, instead of proceeding as planned, his lawyer made a strategic decision. He withdrew the request for bail and instead petitioned the judge to order a psychological evaluation for his client. It was a calculated move, an attempt to delay the case and potentially reduce Brandon's sentence by portraying him as mentally unstable. The judge approved both motions, ensuring that Brandon would remain behind bars without bail while undergoing a psychiatric assessment. A week later, on August 30, 2019, Brandon returned to court, where he was formally charged with the kidnapping and murder of Alexandria Costial. In Mississippi, such crimes carried the possibility of the death penalty. The psychological evaluation found that Brandon was fully sane and competent to stand trial, meaning he would not be able to use mental instability as an excuse for his horrific actions. Despite the overwhelming evidence stacked against him, Brandon pleaded not guilty. His defense team continued to argue that there was no solid proof that he had planned the crime in advance, hoping to poke holes in the prosecution's case. But the digital evidence, GPS data, forensic findings, and his own internet searches told a different story. By the time 2020 arrived, the legal process was still ongoing. The pandemic caused significant delays in the judicial system, pushing back Brandon's trial. By the time the long-awaited trial finally commenced, Brandon Theld made a shocking decision, one that caught many by surprise. After months of insisting on his innocence, after delays, hearings, and legal maneuvering, he suddenly reversed course. On August 27, 2021, Brandon accepted a plea deal, admitting his guilt in the murder of Alexandria Costial in exchange for a reduced sentence. It was a move that spared him the possibility of receiving the death penalty, a strategic choice made by both the defense and the prosecution. State authorities, recognizing the challenges of securing a death sentence given the legal hurdles and evidentiary requirements, agreed to the deal. In doing so, they ensured that the Brandon Theld would spend the rest of his natural life behind bars, never to walk free again.